Salufalava, this is Pacific Waves from RNZ Pacific. I'm Susana Suiswiki. Coming up.
And then you've got to tackle the moral problem. It's pretty hard to ask foreigners to fight for your country when your own people won't do it.
Citizenship will be a hurdle for Pacific Defence personnel. Also, progress is slow in Tonga's cyber attack recovery. And
I took a lot of time off the last few months, especially with my mum being sick with cancer and passing away in the last month.
Athletes continue to give their all at the Pacific Mini Games. The head of Australia's defence watchdog says citizenship would be a big obstacle in hiring Pacific personnel. Neil James says coming to work in Australia is different from coming to potentially fight for Australia. As Caleb Fotheringham reports, the ADF is looking at potentially recruiting Pacific Islanders due to a shortage of 5,000 soldiers.
Fiji's Prime Minister Sitiveni Rabuka says he would welcome a recruitment drive with open arms.
I would like to see it happen. Whether Australia does it or not depends on your own policies.
Australia Defence Association Executive Director Neil James says you can't really fight for a country without being a citizen.
So even a New Zealander serving in the Australian military has to become an Australian citizen eventually to do it. They can start off being an Australian resident, but they've got to be on the path to citizenship. So that's the big obstacle that you have with people coming in from other countries. They've got to be capable of getting permanent residency in Australia and citizenship. And then you've got to tackle the moral problem. It's pretty hard to ask foreigners to fight for your country when your own people won't do it.
And as excited as some people may be at Rabuka's positive response to media questions, recruiting from the wider Pacific would be a big task.
And I think people are jumping at hairs at the moment without thinking through what he actually did say compared with what people think he might have said.
Unlike Samoa, which has voiced concern over a brain drain, both Papua New Guinea and Fiji have ever-rising unemployment. In fact, in Papua New Guinea, it's such a big problem, Save the Children's Pacific Regional Director, Kim Cook, says around half of PNG's population lives on less than $3.65 US a day.
A lot of that poverty is driving food insecurity, compounding violence and neglect. Those consequences are kind of intergenerational. It's really hard to break the cycle of poverty unless you have really specific, dedicated investments in that purpose.
A managing director of People In, the largest approved employer in the Pacific Australia Labour Mobility Scheme, Ross Thompson, says if the recruitment drive does go ahead, PNG nationals would return home with a wider skill set.
This would be a brain gain rather than be a drain.
He's spoken with people in PNG who welcomed the proposal.
When you look at PNG, its population is over 10 million. The proposal that we talked about, land forces last year, etc., we're proposing from PNG, around 1,000 could be recruited every year.
Fiji's unemployment is so bad, Prime Minister Rabuka joked Fiji could plug Australia's 5,000 personnel hole on its own.
The whole lot, 5,000. We easily fill in our quota in the palms. And there is still a long waiting list. But what we would like to do is to reduce those who are ending up in settlements in the cities and not working, giving way to crime, victims to the sale of drugs and AIDS and HIV.
Ross Thompson, also a former captain in the Queen's Gurkha Engineers of the British Army, says he's proud to have served alongside Fijians.
I had the honour to serve with a number of Fijians whilst deployed overseas, and fantastic soldiers. And this is something that's been going since Second World War and is a big part of the British Army.
From a recruitment perspective, he says PNG and Fiji would be a good starting point.
Fiji have done this before with the British Army. PNG has strong history with Australian Defence Force. There's a number of programs that are currently ongoing of shared military exercises. There's PNG officers that are serving in the ADF now or secondment to the ADF. So I think those two countries are definitely good to look at from a pilot perspective.
When it comes to recruiting Fijian personnel in Aotearoa, New Zealand's Defence Force says defence recruiting has not and is not considering deliberate recruiting action from across the Pacific.
It's now been 3 weeks since cyber hackers took down the Tonga Ministry of Health's National Health Information System. Ever since, staff and patients of the country's hospitals have had to rely on what handwritten notes are available. Don Wiseman asked our Tonga correspondent Galafi Moala for a progress report on the recovery.
When the problem happened, Tonga had to reach out to Australia, and they had a group of experts that arrived in Tonga quite quickly, and they're heading up the searching to try to firstly to identify who was responsible for the hacking and to try to do some restoration to the database that has been lost. So that has been an ongoing work, but the latest announcement from the Ministry of Health is that they have identified the group that have done the hacking, a group that demanded a ransom payment of $1 million, but they can't identify any individuals. It's just there's a group overseas that have been doing that.
Are they saying where overseas this group is?
No, they're not. They are unable to say that. They just said a group from outside of Tonga.
The government had promised to take action against these people. It's not going to be able to, is it?
No, particularly if you have a group without a face, or without an actual location. But I think the big part of the work that they're doing is trying to restore some of the data. And the latest announcement is, yes, they're doing that bit by bit. And that's the latest we've heard.
Are people able now to rely on the hospital records, or do they still have to take their own records in when they have a hospital visit?
I think that's one of the big issues that came up is the question was, why wasn't there a backup system? I guess they just didn't expect that one day the record's going to be hacked. But why wasn't there a backup system if it failed? And that's what they're doing right now as well, is try to have a backup system that could not be hacked, so that if the system is hacked, at least they can fall back on that.
It's been suggested that things have moved very quickly in terms of digital access in places like Tonga. And this is part of the reason that this has happened, that the country wasn't ready for something like this.
No, it definitely was not. And things move quickly, but it moved quickly south, unfortunately. I think that helped Tonga to be able to look at backup systems, its other securities, and this Australian group that's here in Tonga is helping them to establish that.
Is the government looking at other government departments to ensure that there is a greater degree of security around their data?
That is a very good question, because just over the last 2 to 3 weeks, there have been all kinds of announcements that have come in. For example, from the Registry of Births and Marriages and all of that, they've been saying that now you've got to do that digitally now, that there's been a complete change over to online registrations, and you cannot do that on paper anymore. And so right in the midst of all of that announcements and public declaration was when this thing of health took place. And so people are kind of hesitant. They're asking a lot of questions. Are we moving in the right direction? Or Tonga, of course, being a very small place, you're not talking about millions of people going online to register. We're only a population of just a little over 100,000. So there are a lot of questions surrounding that, but I'm sure that what has happened to the Ministry of Health, that's putting into alert the other government departments that are going digital.
In Palau, the colour, chaos and competition continues at the Pacific Mini Games, pitting some of the Pacific's best athletes against each other. Aotearoa's Soul Squad, its weightlifters, departed on Sunday, but not before lifting their way to standout success. Coco Lance reports.
Aotearoa's champion Tongan Kiwi weightlifter David Litty dominated at the Games, bringing home 2 gold medals and a silver. However, the lead up to the Games was anything but easy for Litty, having barely prepared after recently losing his mother to cancer.
I took a lot of time off the last few months, especially with my mum being sick with cancer and passing away in the last month. Mentally, it was a little bit tough, but I knew I had to come back to her. My mum would be angry at me if I didn't.
Despite what he describes as a weird and awkward day of winning, Litty has walked away a champ.
A really awkward, weird, successful day for me today. I did not come in expecting to take home gold, but with a little bit of last-minute plans and tactical plays outside at the back room, we managed to surpass all those hurdles and come out with the gold today.
Alongside Litty, teammates Tuialofu Patolo and Judy Solowai added to the team's medal tally with 3 bronze medals. Their respective success has been impressive, with both weightlifters having only joined the sport in the last 12 months. Solowai said that she had initially gotten into it as a mental outlet.
Because of the mental capacity it takes for me to be at my job, I needed something that was going to be an outlet. And I met some friends, I wanted to be active, just something that's more healthier for me. And I didn't realise how naturally strong I was. I do have a career, but it's always good to put myself out there, something that's more healthy and balanced with what I'm doing,
Solowai is also still grappling with what they've achieved in such little time.
I still haven't come to the terms that we made it, and we did really well, and I'm proud of both of us.
Patolo adds that the competition has surpassed their expectations and had some wise words for those thinking of getting into the sport.
Honestly, it's like the best feeling back here. Like, it's the first time that the vibe backstage has been really supportive and just everyone cheering for each other. We're obviously up against some real strong Olympians from Samoa, and they were so cool to just lift alongside and compete against. I hit some numbers that I haven't been able to in training, not even close. So it's just continuing to trust the process and trying to keep striving. And I just want to say the invitation is not just to young women, it's also to the older Pacifica Wahine, because I'm 34. So literally just get amongst it, you might surprise yourself.
The three lifters now have alternative competitions who start training and looking forward to as they build up to the Commonwealth Games in Glasgow next year.
The Flying Fijians almost claimed their second consecutive win over the Wallabies in Sydney on Sunday. Having beaten the Australians at the 2023 Rugby World Cup in France, the Fijians were the underdogs in the one-off test and looked like they were headed for a big losing margin when David Wilson's men led 14-0 heading into the half-time break. A second-half resurgence saw the Fijians lead 18-14 with 4 minutes to go. But the Wallabies found their way to the try line and Wilson plunged the ball to the ground despite desperate Fijian tackles to claim a close 21-18 win and bury the ghosts of Saint Etienne, which had haunted them for the last 3 years. Our senior sports journalist Elias Toro followed the match and joins me in our Talanoa on what could have been another great Fijian victory.
Hola, Eliesa. It was so close for the Fijians and they only lost in the final minutes of the game. Can you talk us through what happened?
Yes, a very exciting game to watch, very interesting for Fiji facing the Wallabies again after that the last time they met and had one in France during the Rugby World Cup in 2023. It was a tight game. The scoreline was 14-5 at the end of the first half, and Australia had scored 2 early tries. But in the second half, the Fijians came back hard. They came back strong. They were running the ball hard. They flicked the ball around, opened up where they could, and they were able to come back into the game in the late stages of the second half. But unfortunately for the Fijians, Wallabies skipper David Wilson managed to find his way through the tacklers and plunge the ball over the line. There were some questions asked on whether the ball was grounded. The TV replays did show part of the ball touching the ground, and Australia, the Wallabies, managed to get a close 21-18 win over the Flying Fijians and claim the Vuvale Bowl in front of over 28,000 fans who had packed the stadium. Amongst them, of course, were Fijian fans who had also turned up to watch the game. A very close game indeed. The two teams playing their first test of the 2025 season. And of course, the Wallabies getting ready to face the British Lions, and Fiji have other matches coming up. It was a good opening game for both of the teams for the 2025 season. But Fiji very unlucky in the end. They could have won it. They had the opportunity a few times. They knocked the ball on just before the Wallabies line. That could have resulted in tries. But the Wallabies came up strong in the end to win and claim their first victory of the 2025 season over the Flying Fijians.
A close match indeed. In your view, Eli, how did the Fijians perform and what were some of the positives head coach McBurn and the side would have taken from that match?
The Wallabies started strong. They played the ball very close. They spun the ball wide. They played it fast. McDermott in number 9 for the Wallabies found the gaps quickly. He took every opportunity to run the ball. They were also able to chip kick over the defense and chase. They wanted territory. When they had possession, and they kicked long when they could. Tried to find loopholes in the Fijian defense, but Fiji came back with their own plays. They were able to slowly get back into the game in the first half. The scrum managed to hold. They won some scrum contests against the Wallabies. There were some issues with their line-out throws, but they managed also to claim 1 or 2 of the Wallabies throws into the line-out. I think where Fiji managed to get back into the game in the second half was when they played their own game. They played quick balls. They were able to show their Fijian flair and break through the gaps. They have a very fast backline. In Chuta Weningolo, they had Yesha Fumasi. They had Tuisoba in the middle who was breaking tackles. And they also had a very good fullback in Salisi Rayasi, of course, who played for the Hurricanes in the Super Rugby Pacific up to last year. And when they played their own game, they were able to get into the Wallabies territory and managed to get the points. Just the basics. I think one of the things that they will be working on is just the basics, that they need to secure the ball first and run and, try and get their options right on the ground. And of course, head coach Mick Burns will also be looking at the players that he would need to tackle the other teams that they will be playing going forward.
And on that note, Eli, what is next for the Flying Fijians?
Well, the Flying Fijians return to Fiji on Monday morning. They have Scotland. To face in Suva. They meet Scotland in Suva on Saturday afternoon. And of course, Scotland won against the Maori All Blacks in Whangarei on Saturday, winning 29-26. So Fiji plays Scotland on Saturday, and then they start preparing for the Pacific Nations Cup, the series against Samoa and Tonga. They play. They host Tonga in Fiji, and then they play Samoa in Rotorua later in September. And then they go into the playoffs with the teams from Japan, Canada, and the United States of America. Fiji, of course, now a tier 1 nation as far as competition goes for them, which means they will now have the opportunity to play more tier 1 teams, the top teams who are in the top 10 of World Rugby rankings. That is something that they are, of course, looking forward to in November. And the next important series for them is the Pacific Nations Cup, of course, where also Samoa and Tonga will be fighting to win qualification for the 2027 Rugby World Cup. The Wallabies, of course, have the British Lions. They have 3 games against the British Lions in Australia over the next few weeks, and those are some interesting games that we will all be looking forward to.
That's Pacific Waves for today. For all episodes, head over to rnz.co.nz/Pacific. We're also on Spotify, Apple and iHeartRadio. From myself and the RNZ Pacific team, tō whā sui fua.